Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. The town of Merrivale had always carried an unspoken weight in the hearts of its residents. Nestled against the tranquil backdrop of forests and hills, it seemed to pulse with an unsettling rhythm beneath its idyllic Circassian air of unresolved secrets tangled in the wind. The locals lived their lives knowing each other, trading smiles over morning coffee while avoiding the corners where shadows thickened. It was one of those places where the smallest incident could turn into a whispered blip. But on the cool afternoon of April 16, 2019, Merrivale crossed the threshold from routine to treasure. A childhood haunt for many. The old cemetery at the edge of town, the kind with ancient stone tombstones and ivy creeping over the demure path, had become the scene of an unimaginable horror. As the sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows, the groundskeeper, Stanley Barrett, discovered something among the grief-laden grave markers, something that shattered the peace of the sleepy village. A bot. It was the body of a young woman, a stranger to the town, clinging to the remnants of her fraying life. Her vibrant auburn hair was muddled against the earth, and cruelly etched upon her neck was the mark of tragedy itself, a phrase crudely carved into his skin, whispering to the living those final moments of anguish. The townspeople held their breath, clinging to an old notion that such horror couldn't possibly happen within the confines of their beloved Merrivale. But as details began to emerge, a darker narrative unfolded beneath the familiar sights and sounds of the town. They thought they knew, and this was just the beginning. The victim. Investigators arrived at the scene shortly after the discovery, their presence heavy with purpose. Among them was Detective Sarah Monroe, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for untangling the most puzzling of cases. As she surveyed the area, her eyes took in the details that others might trivialize at the positioning of the body. The surrounding foliage, the occasional chirp of birds that now felt heavily shrouded in dread. The victim was soon identified as Lila Matthews, a 25-year-old artist from the neighboring city of Ashwood. Up until that fateful afternoon, Lila had led an unassuming life, an array of vibrant canvases reflecting both a thriving creativity and a restless spirit. Those who knew her described a woman who thrived on independence, her laughter echoing behind the easels at outdoor art fairs. However, her recent works hinted at an inner turmoil. Abstract swirls of deep, brooding colors suggested a struggle with the unfulfilled pieces of her life. Detective Monroe delved into Lila's last days, speaking with those who had crossed paths with her. The owner of a local gallery recalled how Lila had shown signs of distress in recent weeks, mumbling under her breath about a troubling figure shadowing her in the streets. She would often look over his shoulder, like she was stumbling through a dream she couldn't wake up from, he recalled, anger still threading through his voice. But who was this figure that haunted Lila? The more Detective Monroe unearthed, the murkier the waters seemed to become. Every lead only deepened her conviction that Lila's death was no random act of violence. It was a sinister call for attention, a warning from the shadows to those who dared to ignore the darkness lurking beneath Merrivale's surface. That day, as rain began to fall softly over the scene, the detective knew this case was not merely about a life lost. He was about a town fractured by hidden fears. Crime scene. The cemetery, once a sanctuary of solitude, had transformed into a harrowing tableau of chaos as forensic teams roamed the area, meticulously processing every inch of the crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the boundaries, a stark contrast against the muted greens and browns of the cemetery's earth. Cameras clicked in a rhythmic cadence, capturing the eerie juxtaposition of death. Amidst the lit, Detective Monroe stood back, observing the unfolding operations with a sense of urgency, aware that every detail mattered. The body lay face down, partially obscured by fallen leaves, but the peculiar carving on Lila's neck whispered volumes to those who dared to listen. Monroe crouched beside the young woman, the wind stirring the chill in the air as she noted the letters etched into Lila's pale skin. Fraud was spelled out, an accusation that resonated with the weight of personal betrayal. It was both cryptic and accusing, a twist of fate that hinted at a darker narrative far removed from mere violence. As the forensic specialists worked, each piece of evidence unveiled a potential thread of Lila's life. A fresh sketchbook, tucked under her arm, contained unsettling drawings, figures with obscured faces and jagged edges. Detective Monroe flipped through the pages, her heart racing as a sense of urgency engulfed her. Each mark on the paper seemed to denote a story, fragments of which hinted at the turmoil that clouded Lila's vibrant essence. A local officer stepped forward, breathless, producing a missed cell phone outstretched in gloved hands. The screen lit with shattered images and frantic messages from an unknown contact. Heaving with an emotional gravity, Monroe took the phone, her mind racing through the implications of what it might lead her to uncover. Behind the whispers of secrets resting in the shadows of Merrivale, perhaps there lay the heart of a resentful betrayal, a motive wrapped in layers of trust and lies that could crack wide open with every meticulous focus of the sea. The cemetery air was thickening. The crime scene was finally talking, and Detective Monroe had to piece together the conversations it insisted on revealing. Time was of the essence, the cracks in Lila's life beginning to show themselves like fissures in the ground beneath her. As she rose to her feet, tension knotted in her gut. The darkness here was not only broad, but it seemed to stretch into the very fabric of the town itself. The early investigation. In the days following Lila Matthews' tragic discovery, the rhythm of Merrivale began to shift noticeably, with the town now thrust into a live stream of rumors and fear. Gatherings at local diners were eclipsed by intense discussions, shrouded in disbelief and dread. As more details emerged, Detective Monroe and her partner, Officer Mike Daniels, embarked on their early investigation, an uphill battle against the tightening grip of community, anguish and suspicion. It began with the friends Lila had left behind. Over coffee in a cramped corner booth at the Cornerstone Cafe, two of her closest confidantes, Mia and Jake, exchanged uneasy glances beneath the eatery's dim lights. Monroe listened as they recounted last-minute plans for Lila's art show at the gallery, the excitement that had fluttered between them dissolving into grief. She was so thrilled to share her work. Then things just changed, Jake murmured, his eyes hanging low as guilt washed over him. Mia glanced up, her voice trembling. She spoke about feeling watched, like someone was following her. It's like she was living in a nightmare. Words turned to emotions, fear bubbling on the brink of revelation. Monroe leaned in, knowing that every fragment of information could save the time and distance they needed to travel down the treacherous path of this case. Over the next few days, each one a relentless race against time, the detective sought to trace Lila's steps. They combed through her social media, finding patterns in her posts and messages, interpreting the veiled cries, In her dark hints were tangled throughout. Friends began to mention a new acquaintance, Tarek, someone who'd recently entered Lila's life, whose intentions seemed to simmer beneath the surface of their interaction. Inquiries led them to local bars, where patrons recalled overhearing heated exchanges between Lila and a shadowed figure. A man whose presence lingered far into the night. A description emerged: disheveled hair, piercing eyes that could evoke both intrigue and unease. He didn't seem like the type to let go when he was denied. An acquaintance relayed, dark brows knitting together under the weight of his serpent. That night, as the shadows grew long, Detective Monroe found himself staring at the sketches Lila had made, grappling with the unease that coiled around her chest. What did Lila truly know about Derek? As she searched for clarity in the chaos, the case twisted and turned, revealing only the first hints of the ominous storm brewing within the heart of Merrivale. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Lila's life had been entangled in something far more dangerous than anyone in town could have anticipated. The dead ends. Detective Monroe felt the weight of frustration settle on her shoulders like a heavy quilt. Days of interviews and evidence collection had yielded little more than threads that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. With each lead that fizzled out, the chilling reality of Lila Matthews' case loomed larger. The truth remained elusive, curling away into the shadows of Merrivale. Derek, the enigmatic figure who had seemingly entered Lila's life just as swiftly as he had exited it, never surfaced. All attempts at tracking him were met with dead ends. Neighbors around Lila's apartment could not recall seeing him. Then the bars he was rumored to frequent supplied nothing but vague acknowledgments of a scruffy young man who rarely lingered. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air. A chilling sense of helplessness settled in. Monroe arranged for background checks on known associates and combed through video footage captured around local hotspots, but it all seemed futile as the investigation dragged on. The once vibrant canvases of Lila's aspirations faded into a gray that mirrored the dwindling hope within the department. The town pulsed with frustration, whispers trailing behind Detective Monroe, wherever she roamed unwanted scrutiny and second-guessing, supplanting their faith in her abilities. Refusing to relent, Monroe sought solace in Lila's art, examining the raw emotion contained in each brushstroke. Within one particular abstracta, swirling maelstrom of reds and black, she spotted a detail that sparked something within. The shadowy figures seemed to bleed into one another like memories colliding, each with unsettling familiarity. Lila might have reached out through her art, concealing the chaos of her emotions in layers of meaning, desperate to escape. Determined, Monroe arranged an exhibit visit, hoping the gallery owner could shine light on Lila's work's intent. Perhaps even the most innocuous piece contained hidden truths. As the hours dwindled, precious time slipped away, but desperation drove her forward. The burgeoning doubt in the department's support gnawed her, fueling her need to press deeper into the unknown. In the gallery that mirrored Lila's spirit, amid swirling colors and poured emotions, the detective made a silent vow. She would not allow this case to slip away like a wisp of smoke. Although the shadows lurked, she would root them out, piece together the fragments, and find a way to bring light to a life extinguished too soon. With renewed resolve, Detective Monroe was determined to comb through each weighted detail. Diatribe. A break in the case. Weeks passed, draped in a heavy shroud of uncertainty, and the case seemed to ebb further away into the undercurrents of silence in Merrivale. Detective Monroe had endured a relentless cycle of fatigue and tension, but little did she know that change flickered just beyond the horizon, waiting to break through her mounting exhaustion. It was early one morning, when Officer Daniels entered the precinct, a flash of excitement illuminating his usually stoic demeanor. "You are not going to believe this." His voice thrummed with urgency as he placed a small envelope on the desk between them. Inside lay a tip card hastily scrawled in black ink. "I was at the diner grabbing coffee, and an elderly woman approached me, claiming she saw something suspicious on the day Lila was killed," he said, his eyes shining with hope. The woman recounted her routine of walking her dog near the cemetery when she noticed a man with disheveled hair stationed by Lila's car. She said he was talking on his phone, gesturing animatedly, and looked like he was waiting for someone. Daniels continued, his words pouring out like a water fountain suddenly unblocked. "I didn't think much of it until she mentioned the distinctive jacket he wore, a green one, with a frayed collar." Monroe's heart raced. That description felt familiar. Hadn't someone mentioned a similar jacket during their inquiries? She rifled through her notes, recalling a bar patron who had been adamant about seeing Derek in a similar garment during their last encounter. With renewed vigor, the pair hurried to the nearby police station to access the surveillance footage from the cemetery's entrance. Watching every moment in close detail, Detective Monroe's pulse quickened as they spotted a lone figure wearing a green jacket, entering the confines of the cemetery just minutes before Lila's body was found. The camera angle didn't capture a clear face, but his frame and posture resonated. A heavy dread settled in Monroe's chest, mingling with a newfound sense of purpose. As they zoomed in on the blurred images, Monroe made a mental note to pull up any known associates of Derek who might fit that description. The leak in the case felt tangible, real, and with the right direction, it could push the investigation forward, like the first rays of dawn piercing through a long night. That day, as the sun warmed the precinct, it felt as if a barrier had been breached. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time in weeks, there was hope flickering with the promise of resolution. Unbeknownst to them, the ripples from that single piece of newfound information would soon spread, awakening dormant truths that lay buried beneath the surface of Merrivale, and perhaps leading them closer to the justice that Lila Matthews deserved. The suspect. The morning air hung heavy with anticipation as Detective Monroe and Officer Daniels convened at the precinct, their last encounter with the surveillance footage igniting a fire of urgency within them. After meticulously combing through the backgrounds of those connected to Derek, a name began to rise above the rest. Alex Harper, a known associate with a reputation that imprinted unease in the locals' minds. With connections in the underground art scene and whispers of unsavory dealings, he painted a murky portrait tone that piqued Monroe's curiosity further. As they executed a search warrant for his apartment, a sense of deft determination filled the air. The time for conjecture had come to an end. Answers were lurking just beyond the door. Alex's apartment, located in a dilapidated building on the outskirts of town, bore a disheveled ambience that mirrored the chaos the detectives anticipated finding. Dust clung thick in the corners, and as they entered, the overwhelming scent of acrid paint met their noses. Canvases hung haphazardly on the walls. Monstrous figures lay concealed within chaos-throwing shadows of familiar shapes the detectives recognized from Lila's last work. Monroe exchanged an uneasy glance with Daniels as they moved deeper into the cramped living space. Unearthed beneath layers of clutter, they found a green jacket draped carelessly over a chair. It was unmistakable. The frayed collar and the unmistakable color matched a description from the witness. Heartbeats quickened in tandem as Monroe snapped on her gloves, knowing they were standing on the precipice of something significant. Their search revealed more. In the chaotic mess of the artist's life, they stumbled across a trove of crumpled documents, receipts, and hastily scribbled notes. As they skimmed through the pages, something jolted within Monroe. Disturbing lyrics scrawled in the margins, dark themes of betrayal and loss echoed the anguish that had pervaded Lila's last canvases. "Look here," Daniel said, lifting a small book where names and dates intersected. Some crossed up. They showed a timeline that unnervingly aligned with Lila's last days, a list of people she had interactions with, right down to her final archer. Monroe felt the oppressive weight of the pieces clicking into place, each name carrying its own gravity. Before they could process the entirety of their find, Monroe and Daniels heard an abrupt thud coming from the bedroom. Without a second thought, Monroe gestured for Daniels to follow. As they edged closer to the source of the sound, adrenaline pumping through their veins. "Alex Harper, this is the police," Monroe shouted, her voice slicing through the tension. The door creaked open, revealing an empty room strewn with paintings. But the chilling outline of a window suggested an escape. Swiftly pursued, yet not entirely within reach, the case had come alive in a way that felt like the crack of thunder rolling through a summer storm. A suspect had emerged, not just anyone, but a man whose gravitational pull to Lila had spiraled into something dark and dangerous. Entangled by unyielding obsession, Monroe could no longer afford to chase shadows. The time to confront the truth was at hand, and it was more twisted than she had ever imagined. The trial. The courtroom echoed with tension, an amalgamation of emotions swirling in the air as the trial of Alex Harper commenced. Families of the victim, townspeople and reporters packed the seats, their faces painted with a mix of hope and trepidation. For a town that had been cloaked in darkness since Lila Matthews' death, this trial served as both a search for justice and an unearthing of the truths that had long been obscured. Detective Monroe sat at the front, her resolve unwavering as she scrutinized the proceedings. The prosecutor, a steady force, with an air of authority, laid out the case against Harper methodically. Key evidence was meticulously revealed: videos of the suspect entering the cemetery, testimony detailing his relationship with Lila, and the emotional weight of the letters found in his apartment. Each witness painting a picture of a man struggling against the boundaries of reality, tethered to obsessions that spiraled out of control. Harper, thin and unkempt, sat stoically at the defense table, occasionally glancing at the jury with a mix of defiance and detached sadness. Monroe observed him closely. His eyes flickered with hints of something deeper, but she couldn't pinpoint whether it was madness or malice. Throughout the proceedings, Harper's attorney attempted to construct a narrative of spontaneous obsession, claiming that Lila had manipulated him, that his art had interpreted her fleeting affections as something more. Days turned into a blur of testimonies, each one lifting the veil on the complex contexts enveloping Lila's life. Mia and Jake recounted their conversations with Lila about a man who seemed overly engrossed in her, a presence that made her uncomfortable. "She was scared," Mia asserted, her voice quaking with emotion. "I wish I had done more to protect her." As the trial progressed, a moment arose that sent ripples of disbelief through the courtroom. Harper took the stand in his own defense, likening himself to a mere pawn in a world that ultimately betrayed him. His voice trembled as he recounted his relationship with Lila, detailing their interactions in ways that blurred the line between admiration and obsession. He painted Lila as a figure who spun a web, pulling him into her chaos, a narrative that elicited some sympathetic murmurs from audience members. However, Detective Monroe remained ever vigilant, sensing the dissonance in his words. During cross-examination, she found herself rising, and as she questioned him, the tension soared. "Did you follow her that day, Alex? Did you confront her about your feelings?" Harper's composure cracked, revealing deeper shades of aggression. "She was using me. I wanted to show her I could create alongside her, but she didn't see." Those words splintered the facade he had crafted, exposing the underlying rage that had wrapped itself around an unrequited love gone wrong. As the closing arguments unfolded, conviction surged through the air, evidence woven together seamlessly behind the prosecution's unwavering commitment to truth. Monroe's heart raced, heavy with hope, the air charged with the promise of justice. She could sense the jury contemplating the twisted narrative unfolding before them, the shadows of Lila's absence imprinted in their hearts. Finally, as the gavel struck, the verdict was imminent. The room sat in breathless silence, a collective hope lingering in the air until the jury filed back in. Their foreman took a deep breath, and the words hung weighty in the courtroom. "We find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder." A release of tension swept through the room, tears and murmurs of relief merging in the aftermath. The fight for Lila's dignity had reached a moment of resolution, but for Detective Monroe, the journey was far from over. She understood that the shadows that had enveloped Merrivale required constant vigilance, and although justice had been served, the scars both on the town and in herself would linger far beyond the trial's end. The aftermath. In the days that followed the trial, Merrivale began to emerge from the fog that had clung to it for so long. The air was tinged with a cautious optimism as the community slowly shifted gears. The echoes of a tragic story, still fresh, but beginning to forge into something resilient. The guilty verdict against Alex Harper had brought a veil of closure, but the scars left by Lila Matthews' death reverberated through the town like ripples on a still pond. Detective Monroe's first few weeks back on the force had felt almost surreal, laden with both relief and heaviness. Although justice had been served, the shadows of the case lingered in her thoughts. Late at night, as she stared out into the distance from her modest home, fragments of Lila's artwork flitted across her mind, bright strokes of color entwined with dark undertones. They encapsulated a life cut short, a dream interrupted. In the heart of town, the grieving process began to manifest in unexpected ways. Residents melded together in an effort to honor Lila's memory, organizing community events to celebrate her artistry. Art classes for local youth were initiated in her name, fostering creativity among the younger generation, while simultaneously channeling the tragedy into something hopeful. The community gallery dedicated a permanent exhibit showcasing Lila's work, vibrancy of her spirit echoing in the hues that brightened the otherwise muted top. However, even as the paintings danced vivaciously on the walls, Detective Monroe found herself pursuing a different quest for clarity. With the reality of a second-degree murder conviction settling into the fabric of her mind, she returned to the sketchbook discovered among Harper's belongings, a labyrinth of swirls, depicting a world both chaotic and eerily connected. What had ignited such a violent obsession? What remained unsaid in their path? After conferring with her team, Monroe reached out to Lila's friends once more. Pieces still entangled in the past. She led a small support group in the gallery space, providing a safe harbor for those still struggling to navigate their grief. To her surprise, the sessions revealed new layers of understanding. Stories unfurled in ways that painted a clearer picture of Lila's complex relationships with those around her. One particular meeting turned poignant when a young artist stepped forward. Someone who had shared brief interactions with Lila at art fairs. She always spoke of chasing dreams, he said, his voice wavering. But sometimes, I felt she didn't believe she deserved them. It was a sentiment that lingered, haunting many in the room as they exchanged nods of recognition. Driven by their reflections, Monroe redoubled her efforts to shed light on the issue of mental health within the artistic community, offering workshops focused on the importance of vulnerability in a world so often shrouded in perfection. She hoped to cultivate an environment where fear would not dictate creativity, nor would obsession overshadow raw talent. In time, she found herself attending an art show dedicated to Lila's memory, the air thick with vibrancy and renewed purpose. Staring at a particular piece, a radiant canvas of sunflowers beneath the stormy sky, Monroe understood that Lila's legacy was one that would ripple through the lives of others, illuminating their paths. As the sun dipped below the horizon that day, casting golden hues across the tower, Detective Monroe felt the weight of grief slowly begin to lift. Though shadows remained, they were now interspersed with hope and the promise of community. The battle against the darkness that had claimed Lila was far from over, but Merrivale had begun to cultivate resilience, reminding her that in the aftermath of the darkest of moments, light could be found anew, woven through shared stories, art, and understanding. Reflection. As autumn unfurled branches draped in crimson and gold, Detective Monroe found herself revisiting the very places emblematic of Lila's story. The bustling cafe, where laughter once mingled with the scent of brewed coffee. The serene cemetery that bore witness to so much life and heartache. The season felt renewed, yet it carried an unmistakable weight. The reflections of loss and healing interwoven with the tapestry of her talents. Every time she walked past the gallery, Monroe felt a pulse of emotion well up within her, a complex symphony of grief, hope, and memory. The impact of Lila's life stretched beyond her years, a reminder that every brushstroke hidden beneath layers of paint bore not only creativity, but vulnerability. Lila had given voice to the turbulent storms within her, and in so doing, had crafted a legacy that others could learn from. The workshops ignited by the community had fostered a space for dialogue surrounding mental health and artistry, realizing the power of collective healing.